Which video that I'm going to be releasing first. So if this is the first video that you see of the new setup, peep the new setup. I finally got a tripod. It's not for a camera, and it's also not for a phone. It's actually for a light that I don't own, and this is the only tripod that I could get for the space that was tall enough. So yeah, love that. Hi, I'm Imogen. Let's get curious. So for 2025, I wanted to do something where I broadened my horizons reading genre-wise, because last year I read a lot of thriller, I read a lot of horror, I read a lot of lit fic, and that was about it, other than the series that I always read, like Pretty Little Liars, which is young adult. I don't really stray far from those three genres, and any like horror, thriller, lit fic, and anywhere that they might cross combine. Like there might be a little bit of fantasy or magical realism in a horror book, or magical realism in a lit fic book. So, you know, they get like, you get subgenres obviously, but the main genres were those three. And I was like, I want to broaden my horizons, especially with fantasy and with sci-fi, because I basically do not read these genres at all unless they are books that are A, extremely popular, or B, books that are on my TBR, or C, it's a subgenre of a book that is a genre that I always read, like a lit fic fantasy book or a lit fic sci-fi book. I never read a book that is just like, first genre is fantasy, next is romance, next is whatever. Or I don't read a book that is sci-fi first, then is comedy or something like that. That's not where my taste lies, and I wanted to broaden my horizons. So for this video, I'm going to be reading 5 fantasy novels and trying to like them. It's going to be a reading vlog, and then the video following this one is going to be reading 5 sci-fi novels and trying to like those. I have a TBR all figured out. I tried not to do series, but that ended up not working at all. I'm only going to be reading one of the books of the series unless I end up really, really loving it. And then obviously I'll continue, but that won't be a part of the video. All of these books are over 400 pages long, which we will debate about whether that is necessary. I think fantasy tends to run a little bit long, especially contemporary fantasy, but we will get into that. So let's discuss the books that I'm going to be reading for this vlog. The first one is Tress and the Emerald Sea, which is by Brandon Sanderson, who is not only one of the most popular and successful fantasy authors of all time, he's also my younger brother's favorite author. And so I was like, yeah, I definitely have to check this one out for this video. Then we're going to be reading House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas, who is quite possibly the most popular fantasy author, maybe even most read author last year, maybe, I don't know, something like that. She has crazy stats. She's a video game character. She's got crazy stats, but she's super well read, especially her Court of Thorn and Roses series, which I will not be reading. I said, I'm not going to read that series. I'm not going to read that book. And I put my foot down. This book is 800 pages long. Normally a book like that would daunt me, but this is Sarah J. Maas. And I don't want to sound mean, but I don't really think it's going to be all that intellectually stimulating. So I'm not worried about it. I think I'll get through it just fine. Then we have Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. This book was recommended to me by actually my high school librarian. My mom texted me. She's like, I was just at book club and so-and-so says that you need to read this book. And I was like, oh, I've heard of it. But I was like, I will read it. It's been recommended to me by 2 people. One of them whose taste I trust. I don't know if I'll trust it for this book, but it has been very highly spoken of by many, many people. And so I will read this book. I think it's 500 some pages long. Then we have The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. I have read one book by R.F. Kuang before. It's Yellowface, so it's not a fantasy book. I think it's probably the only non-fantasy that Kuang has ever written. That book was fine, but I know fantasy is her bread and butter, And so I'm hoping that this book especially will stand out because I know she does a ton of research for her books. She's very involved in the world building and things like that. I have very high hopes for this book. Then we have The Once and Future King by T.H. White. I wanted to commit myself to doing one classic at least, one classic fantasy. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll do The Lord of the Rings. But I have been in a very terrible reading slump. And I was like, I don't think I can commit myself to reading Lord of the Rings right now. Those books are very heady, I know. I've tried to read them once. I didn't get through them. I was like, I don't think I can at this current moment in time. I just don't think I have it in me to read Lord of the Rings. I'm sorry, Dad. I know this is a Arthurian book. I was like, I will read this one. I'm sure it will be interesting. The version on Goodreads that I have on my reading list is apparently 4 books combined into one. So I don't know if it's 4 different tales that are all combined into one. And maybe I'll just read the first one, or maybe I will end up reading all 4. We'll see. It's 600 pages. So, in a book that was written in the 50s, who knows what the language in this is going to be like. Language as in, like, how it's going to read, not language as in if it's going to be vulgar. Those are the books that I have chosen for this video. So, I started reading Tress of the Emerald Sea. And I have some things to say about this book. First off, it started, the very first page, I was like, this is so much worse than I was expecting. It's bad. The biggest issue, I'm about probably a third. The biggest issue that I have with this book is the first part. It's split into 6 parts. The first part was very bad. I am trying to be as nice as possible, but it was so poorly written. I was genuinely shocked. Like, I was appalled at how bad it was. The exposition in this book is just so poorly done. It is the most tell don't show I have experienced in a book for a very long time. I don't even remember when I read a book that was this bad. I know that Sanderson is trying to go for a witty, clever, I likened it to a series of unfortunate events because that's how it seems to me in the storytelling. This book is for young adults. I had to check on Goodreads that I was not reading a book for children because this book does not read like it's for 13 to 17-year-olds. It reads like it's for 8-year-olds. I was genuinely convinced I was reading a children's book. I was like, oh, I didn't realize that Sanderson wrote books for kids. I went to Goodreads. No, it's young adult, so it is, not like for mature audiences. This is supposedly for people who are at least in middle school. I think young people would really like this book. And that sounds, but I promise you, it is not nice when I'm saying it like that. I think anyone over the age of 17 who has good taste would recognize that this book is poorly written. Unfortunately, this book is lauded. 4.32, maybe even higher on Goodreads, which I never trust a Goodreads score. Like, never. I never, ever, ever. Especially for a genre like fantasy. And that's gonna sound really... it's gonna sound pretentious of me, and I'm being pretentious. I'm being really pretentious right now. For a genre like fantasy, where things are a little bit... You can play it a little fast and loose with the rules. But this is a Goodreads nominee for Best Fantasy of 2023. Again, I don't really trust anything on Goodreads, but it has such a high rating. Anything over 4 stars is considered a genuinely good book, and this book is not that. Meanwhile, I just finished reading Wicked, which is in itself just a pretty straightforward fantasy. That book I think has a 3.2, and that book is good. I gave that book 5 stars. Obviously, taste is subjective, but wow. And I'm not just saying this from a taste standpoint. Like, this book is not to my taste. It probably was never going to be, even if it was better written. But from a technical standpoint, this book is bad. It's poorly written. and I just don't understand why people like it so much. I'm gonna stop harping on this and actually get to the story. The story is fine. I have some pretty major issues with how it was set up, which is why I said the first part especially is the worst. The reason why we're taking part in this adventure, it makes sense within the realm of the story, but it wasn't set up well. I'll probably have the book finished tomorrow, so I'll give final thoughts on it then. Hi. So I finished Tress of the Emerald Sea, and was it a good book? No. Am I going to say it's a bad book? I'm not going to go that far, but I don't think it's good. I'm going to briefly touch on what I did like about the book, and then I will move on to the biggest issues that I had. If I talked about every single thing that I disliked, we would be here for forever. I have a few notes just so I don't ramble. So the things that I liked, I thought it was a really good story, and, you know, the ending was very sweet. The message of it was very cute. I do think that for kids were like just learning to read chapter books, probably. Maybe not just, it's a little bit too mature for that, but like 10 to 14 probably. This book is good for that. I don't think it's great. Kids still deserve to read good literature, but I think it's fine in that aspect. I do think I'm a little bit too old to enjoy this. Not that I don't like some young adult. I have talked on and on about how much I love the Pretty Little Liars series, and that's young adult, but that's also, this is gonna sound ridiculous, but it is well written, and I just don't think that this book is all that well written. And another thing that I liked was the world building in this book is extremely interesting. Sanderson did a great job of creating a world that's entirely different from ours. There is logic to the mechanics of how the world works. There is political systems in place. He did a really good job in that, and I can tell that that is something that he does frequently, and he does well, because that was extremely well done. So now I'm moving on to what I dislike. Most prevalent is the writing, because obviously you can't avoid the writing in a book. This book offers very little in way of style. It's all very simple and contrite, and it tells rather than shows more often than not. There were a few things that I thought was good descriptive imagery. For the most part, it was more telling how things work rather than showing any sort of imagery. The narration of this is rather annoying, and I think it gets in the way of the storytelling. There were a few moments that I thought the narration was funny, and I think with a little bit more effort, some tweaks, and more rounds of editing, it could have been good. It could have gotten there, but this version, how it is presented now, is not good. Second thing I want to touch on is the motivation. This is a love story. Technically, it's a love adventure story, and the reason that the main character sets off on her adventure is because of her love was captured. And if there hadn't been a very ham-fisted amount of exposition with two very, very clunky conversations that happen with the two romantic leads, the reader would have no foundation for the entire story happening. The male lead is barely mentioned throughout the story, and I'm not saying that every chapter you have to be like, and I'm doing this because of Charlie, I'm doing it because I need to get there, but only when it is brought up in other contexts really is when the romantic, like, the motivation is brought up, and it's almost to the point where it's like she's just here to do shit. There's side plots that add very little to the actual story. They don't move things along. It really just feels like page filler for a book that's 400 pages long. You do not need page filler. You could probably cut some stuff out and it would have ended up with a better story. So I just think motivation is it lacks in that department. That has to do some with how it is written, because with poorly written exposition, motivation is not going to be very clear, and also bad characterization, which is my third thing. Thank you to Owl Criticism for this phrase. This book booked to stay at the Tell Hotel and not the show chateau. I love that. I'm going to be keeping that. So because of that reason, the only things that you learn about characters are what you are told, either through very stiff and unnatural dialogue or through narrative summary. The only character that I ended up thinking was in really any way dynamic was one of the villains, which is probably not what Sanderson was intending, but I did think that was actually a fairly well-written character, so he at least had one well-written character.
The rest of the characters were mainly archetypes there to fill a role and not much more in any other aspect. Specifically the main character Tress. There are several instances when a character basically says, you're not just a normal girl, something is special about you. And then Tress, either in her own like inner dialogue or back out, she says, no, I'm just a normal girl from a small island. Just because I figured out how to captain a whole ship in like 3 weeks, and I found the Higgs boson particle, and I can raise the dead. I'm not special. I'm just a regular girl. Apart from being incredibly cheesy and slightly misogynistic, I'm just like, it doesn't do anything. Obviously, we, the reader, know that this is not just a regular girl, right? You don't need to throw it, like, force it down our throats, like, she's actually really special, but she doesn't think she is. I can understand that. You don't have to keep telling me that. And more to the point, how about you give me something, show me something to prove this fact that you keep trying to prove over and over again? How about you actually show me something that makes her so special? Rather than just being like, she likes cups, that's pretty interesting, huh? And she talks to rats. Obviously, the masses love this book. That sounded so pretentious. But a lot of people do like this book. Again, I think it's cute. I don't think it's great. It was fine. I think I'm gonna give it 2, maybe 2.5 stars. Next book I'm gonna be reading is House of Ash and Blood. Ooh, let me check that. I think I got that actually right. Wow. Oh, I was fucking wrong. House of Earth and Blood, the Sarah J. Maas book, and the longest one, the 800-page one. Again, I said I was not scared by this book being 800 pages, and I'm still not. This book, I know, is going to be much more adult in its themes, because Sarah J. Maas likes to write smut. So, I'm not super excited about that, because that's not the type of stuff I like to read. I mean, I don't read fantasy and I don't read romance, and this is a romantasy, I'm pretty sure, which is basically the one genre that I like stay away from completely, and I'm just like throwing myself headfirst into this. No one told me to do this. Hi, I'm here to check in on my reading progress for House of Earth and Blood. I'm not very far into it. I think I'm 8 chapters in. 8 chapters of 97, by the way. Did no one edit this book? Did an editor not look at this book and say, that's too many chapters, Sarah? You need to put the pen down. We need to cut some of this out. Did an editor not do that? No? Okay. Okay. Yeah, listen, it's already published, so. Well. But I think I'm 8 chapters in right now. And you know how I said I wasn't worried that this book was really long? Because I didn't think it was going to be that hard of a read. I was correct. This book has a lot of the same issues that the last one, Tress of the Emerald Sea, has a lot of the same issues that book does. And what I mean by that is the writing is very... For a book that is this long, for an author who has been published before, the writing should not feel like it was written by a 15-year-old. And that is how this book reads. Like someone who's never been to any sort of composition class beyond high school. Someone who has never done a 3rd or a 4th draft. Someone who doesn't know what a thesaurus is. Someone who thinks more words equals better. So someone who is just very inexperienced, which I know Sarah J. Maas is not. So I guess she's just a bad writer, is what I'm trying to say. It's not an enjoyable reading experience, but it certainly is easy. I think I'll probably be done with it next week.
Oh my gosh. Yo, this book made me insane. Like, I actually might have to go to the psych ward after reading this book. So, okay, I'm gonna try and set, like, the technical prose aspects of this away while I try and discuss the actual story. This is a thriller. It's like a fantasy thriller mystery, I guess, crime novel.
Romance. Don't forget the romance. Well, okay. So, sorry. So much happens in this book, it's hard to pay attention. Just so much happens in the last 10% of this book that it's hard to, like, get anything in my brain straight. So it starts 2 years in the past, right? And establishing who, like, the main characters are. And then the inciting incident is our main character, Bryce. Her best friend, Danica, is murdered. And then 2 years in the future, another person is murdered, similar to how Danica was murdered. And then Bryce, for some reason, is put on the case. Why? I mean, it does get explained, but it's a little ridiculous as to what justification she is given for being on the case. Like, no, it doesn't make sense, and I refuse to accept it. And then, so, okay, and then the other character, Hunt, who's the other main character, he's like, an assassin, because these books are always like, and there's the girl, and there's the boy, and he's a murderer. And so that's the other main character is Hunt. Yep, his name is Hunt, not even Hunter. So those are our characters, and they're solving stuff together. And basically, long story short, they end up moving in together. The justification isn't really, like, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but whatever. The mystery part of this book would be interesting if there wasn't so much book, if it wasn't so long. Like, I genuinely think there was an interesting, compelling story that could have been told if SJM wasn't trying to write 800 pages. Like, I don't get what the point of that was. If you told the story in a more streamlined way, it would make more sense, be more coherent, and read better. But she's like, I have to make it longer, because longer equals better. Ayy. That's what she said. Basically, a lot of stuff happens about the story. There's this demon, the Crystallos demon. And then this demon is like, they're looking for the horn of Luna, which can open up portals. And the Crystallos demon is trying to find, is like bred to look for the horn. So much stuff happens in this book that's like not important to the actual plot at all. One thing that SJM does a lot is she likes to give lots of perspectives from side characters. And I'm like, why? Because what was the reason? Why do I need to read a story from the perspective of Bryce's brother about how he finds this med witch, how he thinks she smells really good, and he likes her voice? What? How is that relevant? Seriously. And there's so many characters in this book. I don't think you guys get it. There's like probably at least 30 named characters who have some, even if it's like a small, like this small, even if it's like a small part of the plot, they have like at least one scene dedicated to them where they help the story forward in some way. I'm like, we could have told this story better, Sarah. If we had just like storyboarded it, wrote some stuff out, cut out some characters, cut out some scenes, you could have had a good novel, but instead, this is what you wrote, and also got it published too, mind you. So those editors, yeah, they're not off my shit list. Yep, I said it. Okay, so the story. So basically they think that Danica, who is Bryce's best friend, at one point, it's like one chapter they think this, but they're like, yeah, she killed herself and all of her friends because she was high on drugs. And then like the next chapter, they figure out, no, that's not true, and she didn't do that. So I was like, why did we have this scene in here anyway? Like, what was the point of that? But whatever. Then this magical, well, the archangel, Micah, he
basically is the evil one. Sorry, spoiler. Spoiler! And he's trying to open up the gates to another world so that he can be as powerful as the Asteri, who are basically like gods. Basically, they rule the stars. There's 6 of them, and they rule the stars. So he's like, I want to be accepted into their ranks. And, okay, and he's like, I need the horn to do it. And here's the plot twist. The horn is tattooed on to Bryce's back. Yep, on her back, even. Bet you didn't see that one coming. And so, basically what happens is, basically there's a big fight scene. And you're like, oh, finally, the climax is happening. This is the end of the book. And so there's a big fight scene between Bryce and between Micah. A side character dies, and it's played up like it's like one of the most important things in the whole book. It isn't. Nope, not even close. Basically what happens is she kills Micah with a gun. She's like really big. She loves guns. She knows how to shoot guns. It's one thing that Sarah J. Maas wants you to know about Bryce. She knows how to shoot guns. And then she kills him and then cuts his body up and then lights him on fire. But little does she know that Micah, with this drug, this magic drug that's fake magic but real magic, it's a long story, he put it in her back, and the horn that she had tattooed into her back got restored. Its powers got restored, and so basically a portal was opened. Actually, 7 portals were opened to hell, and now demons are coming to the planet, to Midgard. Yes, it's called Midgard, like the Earth is called in Norse mythology. Yeah, it's called Midgard because why not? And so a bunch of demons from hell are coming. It's basically like the end of the world, essentially. And Bryce is like, no, I have to go kill some demons to try and save people. And you're like, okay, well, the ending's got to be coming. Like, the actual ending has to be coming soon. But little do we know, Hunt, who has been enslaved by his ex-girlfriend's, well, his dead girlfriend, not ex-girlfriend, his dead girlfriend's sister, who is psychotic and evil. A lot of women in this book are psychotic and evil. I'm not saying that's a pattern or something, but it's something that happens. So this psychotic and evil sister of his dead lover has enslaved him, and basically he kills her, and then it switches back to Bryce's POV and doing something actually important, which is killing the demons. And then she's trying to get to shelter, but she doesn't get to the shelter, and then she's like, oh, I know what I can do. And here's what happens, you guys. Okay, I'm gonna get real close for this. So, a little lore drop here. The horn was created by the Starborn Prince, and this is a fae who has just like the power of the stars, and only the Starborn Prince can wield the horn. Rune, who is Bryce's brother, is the reincarnation, or he has the power of the Starborn Prince. He's the chosen one, basically, because he's the son of the Autumn King, who is the king of the Fae, and so the Starborn line follows in that line. What happens is, turns out, Bryce is also Starborn, and she has way more power than Rune, and she's also the chosen one. Actually, she's probably more chosen one than Rune is the chosen one. And she finally, after realizing she can't get into the shelter, she's finally like, you know what I have to do? Let me run my happy ass over to this gate and see if with my Starborn power, I can close it. Why was that not her first thought? Why was her first thought not, you know what? I am the Starborn, the only one who can wield this horn that happens to be able to open and close gates to different worlds. Why was her first thought not, I have to get to the gate so I can close it? Why was that a thought after she couldn't get into the shelter? But anyways, then the Asteri, who went to the stars but then they came back, they're trying to level the whole city because the gates are open and they can't. Oh yeah, by the way, she closes one of the 7 gates. But the Asteri are like, we have to level the whole city because the gates are open, so we have to kill the demons. And Hunt, Oh, fun fact, fun lore drop about Hunt. He's the only creature in all of this realm who has lightning powers. No other people, no other person has lightning powers, but he's still like, I'm a bastard, and I'm not special. No, you obviously are fucking special if you're the only person who has fucking lightning powers. Get a grip. Do you think I'm stupid, Sarah? Do you think I'm stupid? He is in this helicopter that a side character who doesn't matter is driving, and then he jumps out and he uses his lightning power to shoot down all the tanks that the Asteri are using to try and level the city. Okay. So then you think, okay, is it done yet? Because, like, I thought the gates had been closed already because she used her Starborn power. Bryce used her Starborn power to close one of the gates. But no, apparently 6 of the other gates are still open. Okay. Okay, so Bryce, at this moment, she sees Hunt's almost dead body. He's lying there because he jumped out of a plane. He doesn't have his wings anymore. So she sees him lying there. She's like, oh my gosh, he's dead. I need to do something. She's like, I'm going to take the drop, which is basically just something that increases your power levels and makes you immortal. You'll have to read the book if you want more lore drop or watch a video on it or something. I'm not explaining more lore. So she's like, let me do the drop and I'll be able to heal you. And guess what? At the same time, lore drop here, I'm going to save the whole city. Yep. The entire city, I'm just going to make it good as new. And I'm going to close all the gates the same time that I'm doing this drop. So she puts her hand on this gate thing. And she's like, hey, is there anyone there? Hey, I need some help. Someone has to watch me while she's killing her mortal body is basically what the drop is. So she's like, I need someone there to help me while my mortal body dies. And no one's listening. No one can hear her. And then all of a sudden, the light from the bone district, something like that, lights up. And fun fact about this lore drop is that no one goes in the bone district, bone ward, whatever, because that's where all the dead people live. So no one can get in there because they would have to be dead to be in there. And so the light from that gate turns on, and she's like, huh? And she hears her best friend Danica on it, and she's like, I'm here. Let's get you your power levels. Let's get them over 9,000. Basically, her mortal body dies, and then her power levels, she had no power levels to begin with. Bryce had no power levels. She was basically non-existent. She just had like a star imbued in her, but that didn't make her powerful. But then when she does the drop, she becomes more powerful than her father, who's the Autumn King. Which, okay, sure. Why not? Because if you forgot, I bet you did. I bet you forgot that she's the chosen one. And guess what? That's still not the end. It's basically like trying, the end of it, the end, quote unquote, is like wrapping up all these minor, minuscule details. It doesn't matter to me. It shouldn't matter to you after we've already had like 4 fucking climaxes in this book. I've had enough of the book. You have too. It's 800 pages long. There's just 2 things. The first is the world building of this book makes no sense. It's so confusing. There's just so many elements that it's like, I don't understand what this is, because Sarah puts so much in the book and expects you to glom onto all of the details without realizing that she's already added so much detail, you can't pay attention to this one tiny little thing over here while you're trying to pay attention to the larger overarching plot that has 15 characters who are essential to it. And another thing is, she just changes random things about what the world that we know and changes them to, for example, the word voicemail, which is something that we all know what it is, and it has a set meaning, and it makes sense as to what it is. She changes it to audio mail? Why? That doesn't connect the points for me. Why did you do that? Because it makes it sound different than the world we're currently living in. But they do live in our world, Sarah. They live in the world that we live in. I don't get it. They live on this earth. So why would voicemail just all of a sudden become an archaic word, and then the word audio mail replace it, which is so similar to voicemail? What? Why? And the one that really got me was she changes the word smell to scent. Not in like the noun way, in the verb way. So instead of being like, I smelled pizza, no, it's I scented pizza. No, you didn't! The word smell exists! It's already a word! I scented the pizza, and it made me hungry. I'm not even touching on the writing. It was very bad. When I tell you, I was losing my mind at just like the sheer audacity that this woman has.
So, the book about dragon sex is bad.
So I finished Fourth Wing, and I would love to do a fun little rant like I did about the last book and explain to you the whole plot of this book. But that's going to be very difficult because there is no plot of this book. So you know how, like, most books, most stories even, have one main plot that runs through them. That there's an inciting incident, and then that's the plot, and then you're building up to one point, which is the climax, and then at the climax, you figure shit out, stuff happens, and then it goes down to resolve the story. For this book, instead of having one main plot that builds up to a climax, there's a bunch of small stuff that happens, and then there's a climax, and then it goes, like, right into the sequel lead-in. And you're like, this book was genuinely so boring to read because of that, because nothing happens. It's 500 pages of nothing happening. So instead of discussing the plot, I want to discuss the world building. Specifically, one aspect of the world building. The dragons. So, this book is about dragons and their riders. It's about a girl who goes to college. Girl's name is Violet. Her name is Violet. I remembered that. I just finished the book. You think that would be a detail that I remembered. This book is about a girl named Violet who goes to a college where she learns to ride dragons. Dragons choose a rider, and then they're bonded with that rider permanently until that person dies. Or the dragon dies. If the dragon dies, the person dies. The rider dies. Ride or die. And so that's where she's at. That's what this all banks on. We're told that the dragons are extremely dangerous and they only choose specific people to bond with. Yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. I want to specifically talk about the dragons. So the dragons they're said to be like 25 feet tall or 25 feet long. Like huge, huge creatures, right? And there's said to be about over 100 for sure, because 100 put themselves up for bonding in the year that Violet is in, and the year before that there was about 100, and there are at least few hundred people who are already bonded with dragons. So that means there's at least probably 500, if not a few thousand dragons around. These huge, ginormous creatures. And most of them populate the Vale and its surrounding area where the college is mostly located, right? Because they want to protect the country that they're in. I don't remember what it's called. It starts with an N. Nevere, something like that. So they're trying to protect that. That's like their main goal, is to protect that. So there's a couple thousand of these guys, right? At the high end, these ginormous guys. And not only is it just these guys, there's also griffins, which are smaller than these guys, but they're also bonded to riders and apex predators. And there's also the wyvern, which are about as big as dragons. We don't know how many wyvern they are, and they're not created in the same way that dragons are. They're made through magic and not like biology in the same way that dragons are. But there's also the wyvern, and that's also an apex predator that eats people. So, to explain what the issue that I have with this, we need to do a little bit of biology. I need to explain the food chain. So, at the bottom, we have decomposters. This is like bugs, like roly-polies, flies, worms. It's also fungi, any bacteria that eat dead things. This is what eats all of us when we die, any leaves that fall off of trees, shit, filth, all of that. They eat that, they nurture the soil. Then it goes to herbivores. Herbivores eat the leaves that has been nurtured in the soil that these guys eat. They eat the leaves, they eat the grass. Think herd animals, cows, deer, sheep, goats, things like that. These guys that don't eat any meat. Then we have the primary. Think of these guys as omnivores. For example, birds. Birds will eat worms, but they will also eat grains. This feeds into the cycle, comes back to here, we feed this, yada yada yada. Then we go up to apex predators. These guys only eat meat. Think wolves, mountain lions, bears. These guys eat these guys, right? Now, what do we have the issue here? The issue here is that dragons, griffins, wyvern, they are all apex predators. And so they will need food from these guys to sustain themselves. Now, in a regular ecosystem, this works because there are not a lot of apex predators around if we're not counting humans. But still, there are less humans than there are any of these guys. There's more birds, there's more deer, there's more cows, all of it, right? That's why we, as humans, and other apex predators like mountain lions and bears have food to eat because there's always going to be more of these than there are of these. They are a small supply, right? I think where I live, where there are mountain lions, there's only a few mountain lions here because they need to be able to sustain themselves on these guys, and if there's like 50 mountain lions in the small area that I live, the food supply is going to go, it's going to get smaller. So now, if we consider just the dragons, which we know that there is at least a couple hundred dragons, so we're going to go 500 or so dragons, all in this one Vale surrounding area, right? We are told that the dragons eat sheep and goats, mostly. That's mostly what they eat. We are told in the reading multiple times that this is what they're eating. So, for this many dragons, creatures that are ginormous, so they need a lot of food, especially when they're doing something as taxing that they are doing every single day. They're always out, they're always flying with their riders. So especially for these dragons who are out riding every single day, they're going to need a lot of food to keep up their energy because they have so much mass. They have so much mass that requires more energy. So they're going to need an inordinate amount of food. Consider just the 60 so dragons that bonded in Violet's year. They're all flying around, they're practicing with their riders every single day. This dragon, it goes back to its den. It's gonna need to eat after a long day of flying. It goes over to a pasture where there's some sheep and goats. How many sheep and goats do you think it's gonna need? Because a sheep or a goat, it's not that big, genuinely. It probably weighs a couple hundred pounds. Meanwhile, this dragon probably weighs a couple hundred tons. There's a reason that prehistoric gigantism, like we saw, dwindled. It was because these creatures, like the megalodon, like the sloth, the North American sloth bear, these things, their populations dwindled. It was because they couldn't get enough food to sustain themselves. And so, gradually, these types of animals died out. How are these couple hundred dragons sustaining themselves every single day with all the food? They're going to need literal oceans of sheep and goats just to sustain themselves throughout the year. And I'm guessing that this small country that she lives in does not have literal oceans worth of sheep and goats. Now, I'm not saying that having dragons in your world and having dragon riders in the world is not a cool idea. I actually think it is, one of the more interesting parts about this book, and having dragons bond to people. I think that's pretty interesting. But the issue lies with there was clearly not a lot of thought put into this world building. It was just a lot of ideas that Yaros had, and she didn't put more thought into it. You can see that in other aspects of the world building, which I won't get into because I don't want to talk about this book for much longer. But you can see that she did not put enough effort in to realize that this model that she has of thousands of dragons up here needing hundreds of thousands of food source here. She didn't put a lot of thought into that. And this book is ginormous. It makes me angry, honestly, to see the lack of care that went into this book and the amount of rewards that it's getting from it. I think this idea could have been honed, and it would have been possibly even more interesting. Let's say that there's only 3 dragons that bond per year. Yes, it's gonna make the dragon riders' forces a lot smaller. But then you would have, oh, it's really interesting that this very small, tiny little protagonist girl, she gets bonded with one of the oldest and most powerful dragons who hasn't bonded in a long, long time. Because there's fewer dragons, and she, out of all of this bunch, out of her whole class, did get bonded. That would be interesting. Or if instead of saying that the dragons ate sheep and goats, the dragons power themselves from energy from the earth. Something like that. That could have been a way to solve this problem as well. This book feels like a first draft. Like, no one went over it. She had no other people workshopping any ideas with her. It was just like that dreamscape that we have in our minds when we're like trying to get to sleep, so we build on ideas in our brains. That doesn't mean that it's gonna make a good book. Just because it sounds really good in your head doesn't mean it's gonna make a good book, as is evidenced by this one.
Five stars.
Okay, my audio's recording now, so let's do this again. Finished Sword in the Stone. I decided I wasn't going to read all of Once and Future King because I didn't realize that it was a children's book. If you want to argue with me and say that it's not a kid's book, I don't know, you can argue with the wall, because that was clearly for kids. I enjoyed it pretty well for what it was, except for when a bird just dropped the N-word out of nowhere. I was like, what the fuck? Why did I... It was literally out of nowhere. Like, I was just reading, and all of a sudden, boom! I was like, what the fuck? But it was written in the 50s, so I'm not all that shocked. Like, I don't respect it or anything, but it was the 50s. White people were just saying the N-word all the time. That was not cool shit. I really wasn't expecting it to be what it was. I was expecting more of like a Lord of the Rings, like a little bit, I don't know if stuffy is the right word, but like headier language. But it was, like I said, it was like a kid's book. It was a lot funnier than I was expecting. It kind of reminded me of like a book that my dad would read to me before going to bed. So that's the vibe I got from that. Not bad by any means. So if you want to introduce your kids to the classics, I guess this is a good book to do. It didn't really have a whole lot of plot. It was just like a bunch of random stories, like going on adventures, which was cute, but not what I was expecting. I did like the ending where all of the people from his adventures come together. It wasn't just him pulling the sword out of the stone easily. It was all of his, like, the people from his adventures coming around and telling him what he had learned and being like, here's how you can pull the sword from the stone, which I thought was cool. I don't have a whole lot more to say about it. I think I'll give it 3 stars and move on to the end of this video. Overall, I am pleasantly surprised by this video. I enjoyed these reads more than I was expecting to. So I see myself reading more fantasy, especially literally right after I finished reading The Poppy War, I ordered the trilogy. I was like, I have to own these books. So I did that. I was like, these are so good. So I'm definitely going to be reading more of R.F. Kuang. What else do I want to say? Oh, I wanted to touch on a few things that I didn't at the beginning and while I was doing my vlog portions, about a few things that I just don't like that are often common tropes in fantasy, especially modern fantasy. I do not like chosen one stories, and I don't like fated pairings, soulmates, mate bonds, whatever you want to call it. I do not like that in my fiction, and it's for the same exact reason. I don't like chosen one stories or fated pairings for the same reason, and I think it's a cheap and lazy way to tell a story if all you have to say is this person is the chosen one and that's why they are so powerful and so special. It makes it easier for you to be like, well, that's why, instead of actually doing any real characterization. Same with fated pairings. You don't really have to build a romance if it's all like they're meant to be together. I would prefer a story where it's like, this person is my mate, but I choose to be with someone else. So if you have any good recommendations of stories like that, send them over. And I see myself, like I said, I want to read more fantasy now that I've done this, especially from R.F. Kuang. So I'm excited to be entering into a genre that I do not read all that often. I don't think I'll be reading any more romantasy. I did fall into like this crazy, like, I got obsessed with the Crescent City, like, story. I was like, there's this YouTuber, Carrie Can Read, and I will link her, Forgot the Plot videos, where she explains all of it. She is so, like, she's hilarious. And I just recommend watching those. And then for Fourth Wing, if you want a really good video going in depth on Fourth Wing, I think it's Reads with Rachel is her name. I will also link that video in the description because she has got a great video on Fourth Wing. And both of those creators read a lot more fantasy than me, so they are more familiar with all the tropes and all of that. So I would recommend both of those creators. I don't have a whole lot more to say. This video is long enough as it is. I've been editing it and it is already quite long. So I'm just gonna leave it here. If you liked the video, go ahead and like it. You can leave me a comment. You can subscribe. You can do none of these things. You can do all of these things. Check out my Goodreads. Check out my Letterboxd. Check out my Substack. I don't think I have anything planned on my Substack right now because my life is crazy with school, but this summer I don't have any classes, so expect more there. And that's all I have for now. Peace. Bye. Also, I think, for me, when I was picturing this book and where it happened, I pictured it in New York City. So, like, because there's, like, 5 districts. I don't know what they're called, and don't ask. But there's 5 districts, and I was like, oh, my mind immediately went to the 5 boroughs of New York. New York City. And so I was like, but there's the river, and then across the river is the Bone District, the Bone Ward, whatever it's called. And so I was like, in my mind, you might be thinking, oh, Brooklyn, right? No, in my mind, it's Jersey, because no one goes there. But that's what we call a joke. Thank you. I'll be here all week. This book is good. You should read it.